In my last SpongeBob retrospective, I talked a little bit about old versus new SpongeBob, and I wanted to make my own video talking about it because it's not really a new discussion, but there are things that I did want to point out in terms of the differences between the two, my own thoughts between the two. And when I say old SpongeBob, I specifically mean seasons 1 to 4 versus everything from that point onward, season 5 onward. Season 5 onward is newer SpongeBob. It takes a newer style. The animation is definitely different, although that new animation style kind of starts in season 4. But the way that they write stories and the way that certain characters are portrayed changes from season 5 onwards. Now, a lot of people might say that new SpongeBob season 5 onward is a completely different show, and for many it's unwatchable. I don't agree with the opinion that it's unwatchable. You know, they don't do anything horribly offensive as far as it doesn't get political or ideological. It still stays at its core SpongeBob. But the problem that I, and I'm assuming many others, have with newer seasons as opposed to the older ones is with older SpongeBob, it felt like it was consistent in its characterization of each character. The storylines fit the characters very well. You knew who you liked, you knew who you didn't like, and sometimes you could be convinced to like a character that you didn't like if the story was good enough. In the new episodes, they make you hate characters that you like. I'll give you an example. One major example of making you dislike characters that you would otherwise like in older seasons are SpongeBob and Patrick themselves. SpongeBob and Patrick, when they used to get together in seasons 1 to 4, it was always, okay, something goofy and fun's going to happen, and don't you just love their innocent, goofy friendship? In newer seasons, they dial up their annoying personality traits to 11, and they know it. They point it out all the time within the show. To the point where they make you feel bad for Squidward, because in the earlier seasons, it's like, okay, they're a little annoying, but they're not, like, a cheese grater on the back of your skull. Whereas in newer seasons, SpongeBob and Patrick are so annoying. They make noises for no reason. They're engaging in way more slapstick than usual. It's just annoying, and I can only imagine this was done as a result of some sort of focus group test or some sort of network involvement with the production of the show, which obviously Nickelodeon's going to be involved because they own the show. I mean, Steven Hillenburg sold it to them initially back in, 1999, 1998. So it's their show. They can do whatever they want with it. However, it has significantly changed. And I'll be honest in saying a lot of people want to say that Steven Hillenburg is the reason the show was good, but he doesn't have a whole lot of writing credits. In fact, I don't know how many directing and producing credits he has. I mean, now he has producer credits because it's, he's no longer with us. May he rest in peace. But he wasn't really all that involved after, I don't know, what was it, the first season? It seemed like he had just moved on. I don't know whether that was because of health or whatever reason, but if you look at the names of the writers and directors, a lot of the same people have been on the show since basically the beginning. So I don't think it's really fair to say that Steven Hillenburg, I mean, he created the show and all the credit to him, but it more so goes to the writers that have been there consistently. And some of them have changed the style and ways that they do things. They've changed the way that they write the characters. Like I said, a lot of the characters, they take their most well-known personality traits and they dial them up to 11, such as Mr. Krabs' greed. It's dialed up to a ridiculous degree, even though it slowly was building up that way in earlier seasons. But it never got to outlandish degrees to the point where Krabs never got his comeuppance. But a lot of times now, it feels like Krabs is getting more away with being exorbitantly cheap in a cartoonish manner. And look, I'm not complaining about a cartoon being a cartoon, okay? SpongeBob is a cartoon at the end of the day. But there is a different level of cartoony nature in the first seasons as opposed to the second. Everything is dialed up to absurd degrees. I don't know, I think they must have believed that kids just don't have the attention span that they used to because of social media, because of smartphones. And in reality, that might be true to a degree, but you gotta remember, kids are kids. If they see something they laugh at, it's fine. But you also had SpongeBob being a family show, not just a show that kept kids' attention. And now it's going from a family show to just a show that keeps kids' attention with cheap gags and over-the-top slapstick and just loud noises, loud laughing and screaming, and it's just, it's crazy. It's almost trying to be like a rubber hose style animation, but not quite as endearing as those cartoons were from the 30s and 40s. It's not nearly as endearing. But I think most people will agree who have been fans. I mean, I started watching the series when it premiered in '99. I remember that at the end of the premiere of that Kids' Choice Awards. I think it was amazing. And I've been watching ever since. I have the Season 1 DVD collection, the original box set of Season 1. And I need to actually get Seasons 1 to 4, or Seasons 2 to 4. On DVD or Blu-ray. I haven't decided which yet, and I don't think they have them on Blu-ray yet, but I need to get them regardless. But that aside, I've stuck with this show since I was 8 or 9, and now I'm 30. And I don't make a habit of watching new seasons all the way through, but I go back and watch what's going on just to see where this show is, because it's amazing to me that it's still running. And it's in a very weird place. I don't agree with people who say that new seasons are unwatchable. Some episodes are, definitely. I've had to sift through tons of episodes because the plot lines end up being so absurdly predictable. It's like, oh yeah, this is where this is going clearly, and it's not fun. You can tell where this is gonna end. And I'd imagine kids feel the same way. You know, if I can predict, having watched SpongeBob for most of its 20-plus year duration, if I can predict where plot lines are going, I'm assuming most kids who have watched the series long enough can too. And that takes a lot of the fun out of it. I know there was a midway point through the new seasons where they tried to be really experimental with gross-out humor, and that completely failed. Absolutely. Episodes like the Splinter, and the one episode where Squidward gets his toenail ripped off. I don't even remember what it's called, nor do I care. Just horribly, horribly gross-out humor. And they've kept a little bit more of that, but it didn't work for them. You know, they're not cartoons that did that. SpongeBob isn't that type of show, but they tried to make it into that type of show, and it didn't work, at least not for me. But, I mean, the show is still airing. They're still getting as much as they can out of the series. And I don't know, in the long term, what that's going to mean. Ultimately, I don't know what the show is going to look like if it goes for 5, 6, 7 more seasons. I don't see it going for that long, but I'm also not involved with Nickelodeon's decision-making when it comes to that. Now, I know that they're doing the spin-offs, and I will include that in the conversation. That could be its own video, but the spin-offs to me say that eventually SpongeBob is going to end, and they want the universe to continue. They want to create a SpongeBob universe, which I'm fine with, but the way they're going about doing it is terrible. You've got Camp Coral, which is based on a scene in the newest movie, which I still haven't seen. I haven't seen anything past the first movie as far as the movies are concerned. I don't know. I wasn't into it, but it's based on SpongeBob's quote-unquote youth, even though canonically there's several issues with that, so it's its own universe. And you got the Patrick Star Show, which is its own universe. It's animated much the same as the regular SpongeBob show. They have the first episode on YouTube. I watched it, laughed only once. There was only one gag that made me laugh. The rest of it was just unbearable. I can't do the Patrick Star Show. It's terrible. I don't like it at all. And I don't know why it's still going. I guess they're probably contracted for a couple seasons, but I don't know. And Steven Hillenburg himself came out and said that, you know, when they started making all these spin-offs that he would be done, and I think he knew for a long time that they were going to do that, so he exited out early, then he came back for a little bit, and then his health took a turn for the worse, and now he's gone, so rest in peace to him once again. But I think he saw the writing on the wall, 100%, and that's kind of why he stepped back, because Nickelodeon was just going to get crazy with the show, and it's just, you don't want to do that. But at the end of the day, I think that what they're going to need to do, if they want the series to continue to have momentum, is they need to tone back the character traits. They need to make SpongeBob a more measured character in terms of his overall personality. They need to, like, for instance, they can make Patrick dumb, but they shouldn't make him as dumb as they have recently. They've made him so dumb recently that he's basically a nuisance throughout the town. He used to just be a lovable, relatively harmless idiot, and now he's like a menace to Bikini Bottom. It's just, it's really annoying. And then, when him and SpongeBob get together, which was one of my original points, when they used to get together, it was harmless, innocent fun. Now they get together, and they're both menaces to society, and they're both incredibly annoying, and you just empathize with Squidward on levels you didn't think were possible. You know, before you were like, oh, Squidward, you're just being a grouch, and now you're like, oh, Squidward, you poor unfortunate soul, having to live next to these two monsters. You know, it makes you dislike the title character. I don't want to dislike SpongeBob as a character. I want to like him. I want to enjoy the episodes that he and Patrick are in together, because their friendship dynamic is supposed to be so pure and innocent. And now it's just, they're both menaces. They're both idiotic menaces. And it's just, it's not fun. And they don't redeem themselves in a lot of episodes. I mentioned in my retrospective of Season 1, Episode 2, that Bubble Stand, Episode 2A, establishes the trope of SpongeBob and Squidward and Patrick's dynamic, and how Squidward always gets screwed over in the end by SpongeBob and Patrick's antics. They've taken that concept to 11, and they haven't redeemed SpongeBob and Patrick in any way in the eyes of the viewers, in my opinion, in newer episodes. They've just made you empathize with Squidward more and more, and they've even made Squidward worse. They've made him more malicious. And they still try to say, oh, well, Squidward secretly loves SpongeBob and Patrick, and he can't live without them. Yeah, that's pretty well established, but I have a hard time looking at Squidward as any sort of bad guy or foil to SpongeBob and Patrick. I just feel bad for him. And you know who else I feel bad for? Is Plankton. Plankton has been made the butt of pretty much every joke because he's a horrible failure. Like, he's a horrible idiot. And his voice actors come out and said this multiple times. They just treat him like garbage because he's, you know, he's small and he's got these evil big ambitions. And obviously you don't want the evil guy to succeed in a kid's show, but I remember in the original SpongeBob movie when he got the Krabby Patty secret formula in that, I was so happy. And people are like, why are you happy? It's like, he's an evil guy. He used it to take over the world. I'm like, yeah, but he had failed so many times up to that point and had just, I mean, he's failing to do something so simple. He's got the Roadrunner and Coyote type inventions that he does, and they're supposed to have a genius brain, but really he's just a moron. But he's basically the show's punching bag at this point.
Can my day get any more
or stomping bag, as the case may be. Doesn't mean he doesn't have good episodes in the newer seasons. He absolutely does. However, he's very much been relegated to a joke character that nobody should take seriously or even like. And he's not likable. You know, he never learns. He's always in perpetual misery. It's just, he's not a fun character anymore. He used to be a very fun character, and very balanced character, much like SpongeBob, Patrick, Sandy, Squidward, Mr. Krabs. I think one of the only characters that they haven't really assassinated in newer seasons is Pearl. She's been very consistent. You know, because she's just a teenage girl, so there's really not a whole lot you can do with her there, but I think she's been consistent. The rest of the characters that have gotten more screen time have all but been assassinated. Well, wait, no, that's not true. There is one character that, believe it or not, I think new seasons have actually expanded on and somewhat improved, and that is Mrs. Puff. She's a metalhead. She's got a relationship sort of with Mr. Krabs, which is all kinds of awkward, even though that kind of started in earlier seasons. But they've made it more consistent, and they've used it as a plot device. And I think it works. It's just weird, especially for a kid's show. Any sort of romantic relationship in a kid's show is just kind of awkward, or a family show. So, but it's not inappropriate. I think it's fine. It's as realistic as it can be. But ultimately, I think that's a character that's been improved, but that's a rare exception. And maybe Larry the Lobster, who I really like. They've given him a little bit more characterization, and some of his own episodes, which I really like that they've done. I like Larry the Lobster a lot. You know, I mentioned that in my season 1, episode 2 retrospective, is I really like Larry the Lobster because he debuts in Ripped Pants, season 1, episode 2B. So, I really like what they've done with him. But most of the main cast has been just... I mean, even Sandy, they made her a genius, yeah, okay. But they've also made her obnoxious at times. She's still kind of got her same characterization overall. But they've made her kind of scummy in some episodes. Like, there's one episode devoted to her treating SpongeBob and Patrick as lab rats. And that's just... I don't know, it's scummy.
I love opening presents.
I don't really like it, but... And then there's an episode where she's overly competitive and tries to ruin SpongeBob and Patrick's fun and make all their activities just over-the-top extreme. Which is basically them reusing Pre-Hibernation Week in a lot of ways. Which was a good episode. But it's becoming blatantly obvious to me that the show they're desperate to try and figure out something that sticks, that will keep people stuck around, and they haven't quite managed to do it in a way that's coherent and that is consistent. It's wildly inconsistent. Like I said, in new seasons, you have to fish around to see what kind of episodes are good and what are bad. I was watching one today. While I was doing some working out, I was watching an episode today, and it was where SpongeBob and Squidward had to basically clean up trash around Bikini Bottom, and Patrick's appearance in that episode, he was so ridiculously dumb. Ugh. And it really, like, as I was working out, I had to stop my treadmill and be like, wait, what? Why are they making Patrick this absurdly dumb?
Squidward,
and I know I'm just repeating myself at this point because I've still got loads of minutes of video to fill. I kind of over-recorded gameplay footage. I recorded a little too much, about 30 minutes, so I'll end up repeating myself. You'll have to bear with me. But they made him so shockingly dumb that I actually had to pause and go, who is this character? This isn't the character that I've seen for the first 4 seasons of SpongeBob. This is... Like, they had him barking like a dog, and there's a whole episode where he thinks he's a dog. There's an episode where he thinks he's an old man. It's like they don't know what to do with him. He's just an idiot that they can mold and press to whatever shapes they need to, and these episodes aren't very compelling because you know anything that he tries to do, he's going to fail at because he's a moron. So, he's not even a lovable moron, he's just a malicious moron. Everything he does, he breaks or causes some form of chaos. I don't feel anything for Patrick anymore. I used to think, wow, he's a great character. The only decent episode I can think of with him in these newer seasons was the one where he tries to basically be Squidward. Squidward ends up having to move in with him, and he basically becomes Squidward. I thought that was a fun little character experiment, hearing Bill Figurbakey, however you say it, do basically a Squidward voice was really, really neat. I like when voice actors do that. But, I mean, his general characterization is really not great. And it's sad. And then there's SpongeBob by himself. SpongeBob used to be just a lovable, kind-hearted, somewhat dim-witted, but that wasn't really a personality trait of his, is that he was fairly intelligent. He's just childish in nature and innocent. And now, he's not just harmlessly childish in nature, he's maliciously immature. And loud and obnoxious. And really bizarre. And again, the show, I think, is well aware of these character traits because they put them in there, and sometimes they point them out. But I end up feeling more for the citizens of Bikini Bottom and the side characters that have to deal with SpongeBob or Patrick or even Squidward at times or Krabs than I do for the actual characters. It's like I'm rooting against the main cast. You shouldn't be putting me in a position to where I'm going, okay, I want these characters off the screen. But that's what they're doing with these newer seasons. Every once in a while, they get it right. They get the characterizations right, and it ends up being watchable, but it's not consistent. You really have to fish around, and an episode might start out with the characters seeming relatively grounded, but then as the episode continues on, the characters end up being more and more absurd and more bizarre, and it just isn't fun. I can't tell you how many times I've clicked off an episode because it just went from decent to, okay, this is going in a bad direction, and I don't care to see where it ends because it's not going to be a satisfying conclusion. But that's how they're writing the show now. In the old seasons, most episodes were easy to follow, the plot lines were simple, and the characterizations were consistent with how they had been prior. You know, they put the characters in real situations, they had them solve problems based on their personality traits and what they were capable of. And it was good. I'm trying to think of it, like, look at the example of Pickles. I think it's season 1, episode 11, if I'm not mistaken. In that episode, Spongebob, who is, I've said this multiple times, he's not a good fry cook, he's not a great fry cook, he's an exceptional, phenomenal fry cook. The best adjectives you can use to describe somebody being the master of what they do is what SpongeBob is with fry cooking. They basically handicapped him by having a foil with Bubble Bass, a character that they've just started to bring back, and I'll get into that in a minute. But basically, he took all the wind out of SpongeBob's sails by saying, oh yeah, you're not as good as you think you are, you forgot the pickles, and it threw him off entirely. It wrecked basically his whole life, and then Krabs has to shake him out of it. Krabs wasn't so greedy that's like, oh no, we don't need SpongeBob, and I could just hire a robot or something to pay him, like he would in newer episodes. He actually took the time to try and guide SpongeBob on going back to his old self by learning how to make Krabby Patty again. And they had a really funny, you know, day and night cycle gag in that episode. And
Feel like a new sponge.
SpongeBob, you actually got to see some dynamic of SpongeBob, of him just basically going crazy. And him getting angry. You don't see him getting angry very much anymore. It's like, we don't really like SpongeBob when he's angry, but that made him a well-rounded character. You saw him get angry. You saw him call Krabs a crustaceous cheapskate. You know, it was a really good episode, because you got to see SpongeBob as a dynamic character. He has flaws. He's capable of feeling like he screwed up, and that affecting the overall course of his life. Nowadays, you don't see that with SpongeBob. He's just a nitwit. You know, not too much unlike Patrick. He doesn't really learn anything. He doesn't really grow as a character. He gets into a situation that he or somebody else causes, ends up solving it, and is no different for it. But with this Pickles episode, he had a renewed confidence, and he didn't lose his skills entirely. And it had a fun, satisfying ending. But contrast that to a new episode. Now, Bubble Bass is just basically he's become a parody of the fat nerd on The Simpsons whose name escapes me. The stereotypical overweight nerd who lives in his mom's basement and just is terrible. That's what Bubble Bass is. That's what they brought him back is, and they feel so proud of themselves for doing that. But in reality, he doesn't need that much development in terms of being this fat, sweaty nerd. He really doesn't. But that's what they gave him, and now it's just like, in almost every episode, he's some sort of villain. You know, the last cameo they had him in season 1 was decent, with the fun episode, which I don't remember which number that is, but I know it was season 1, because they had the fun song. You know, he made a fun cameo in that, but they've been just making him into a horrible character who I don't really care to see on screen. So they're doing all sorts of very weird things. They're doing a lot of, let's go back to previous seasons and bring stuff back, but let's give it a depth that it didn't have before, and in some cases didn't need. And that's, I think, one of the problems with the new seasons, is they're realizing that they messed up, especially with the gross-out humor thing, and they're trying to basically fix that, but they're not portraying the characters the way that they should be portrayed. They're not making them watchable. They're making them over the top to keep kids' attention. and completely ignoring anybody else who would be watching. Like, if you sat your kids down in front of it and watched it, it'd be unbearable. It's like, okay, you kids can watch this, I'm going to go do something else. Whereas back in the day, old SpongeBob, you know, I remember my brother-in-law used to watch it, and my sister, with my nieces. But nowadays they wouldn't. It'd be so annoying. And granted, they're a bit older, but still, it's like, it's not a fun family show anymore. It's just obnoxious, and it's obnoxious for the sake of kids' attention. And I don't think it works. So they need to get back to being more consistent, telling more creative episodes. I think they've definitely built up Bikini Bottom as a society enough to do that. But they haven't done the characters justice. And that's really, really unfortunate. I'm not gonna say that it's all unwatchable. I do think there are episodes in newer seasons that are watchable. There really are. There are some that got a lot of laughs out of me. They had a lot of well-written gags, and a lot of times where they brought the characters back down to earth for a good joke, but then they immediately went back up into the sky and being turned up to 11 or 12 or whatever dial-up you want to use, whatever dial-up analogy. They never stay grounded. They always are obnoxious and over the top, and that's not how they used to be. You know, you don't let anybody tell you that's how they used to be. All you need to do is go back and watch seasons 1 to 4. That's not how they used to be. You can see what they're becoming in season 4, but in season 1 to 3, they were incredibly measured. Even when they put them in over-the-top situations, they were very grounded characters. But they must have thought that kids felt like that were boring, or was boring. I don't know what that was. That wasn't even really a sentence. They must have felt like kids thought that was boring, because they just completely changed it. And now, I think they're trying to find a balance. I don't know what they're going to do this next season. I think it's season 13, as of the recording of this video. That's what's ongoing. It'll be interesting to see what they do. You know, they've got to do something if they want this thing to go long term. And unfortunately, I don't think that they're really committed to making it better long term. I still love the show. I think I'll always love the show, unless it just becomes so unrecognizable that it is unwatchable. And unfortunately, for a lot of people, the show's already at that point. The show isn't the show that they grew up with, you know? It was made for my generation. You know, I was born in 92, so it was made for, really, my generation. Like I said, I was 7 or 8 when the original show debuted, and now I'm 30. And it's something that I think a lot of us want to pass down to our kids. I don't have any kids, but I've got friends who do, and I think they want their kids to be able to watch it. But it's going to be hard because the new stuff is just so absurd. It's just noise in the background now, as opposed to something that's, oh, this is really interesting, this is really fun. You got to remember, SpongeBob was everywhere. SpongeBob Mania back in the early 2000s. There's all sorts of merchandise, and there was all sorts of hype. I remember when they announced the movie, and I remember going to see the movie. I remember what theater I went to, and it was really, really fun. I remember it being a really fun adventure, you know, with the live-action sections. They implemented those really well, which could be very controversial. But they did it with such class, and it was done so well. The new movies, I don't know, I can't comment on them, but the newest movie looked like it was going to be fun, but I didn't bother, because if it's written more like the newer shows, I just don't want to see the characters assassanated, or like the newer seasons, rather, not the newer shows. Well, it could be written like the Patrick Star and Camp Coral, but I don't, like I said, I don't like either of those. I don't give them much credence. I think if they're going to continue the SpongeBob universe, they should think about a Squidward spin-off, or a Mr. Krabs spin-off, a Plankton spin-off, maybe? I don't know. Anybody but Patrick, because Patrick is just, they've done such a disservice to Patrick. It's almost criminal. He doesn't deserve his own show, especially the way that they did it. They just made it seem so... It's even more juvenile than SpongeBob, and it's really embarrassing in a way. You know, it's almost preschool levels of stuff. And I don't know about Camp Coral, and I don't particularly care. So, it is what it is. But hopefully the show can regain its legs. But my point is that old and new SpongeBob are both watchable. But there's a reason that people prefer the old as opposed to the new, especially if they've been long-time watchers anyway. New kids might not care as much. New kids might just watch whatever because they're kids. But people who've been watching the show for a long time, they definitely understand that it is a different product, and the characters just don't feel the same, and that's the worst thing you can do to a show, is assassinate its characters, and that's what they've done. So hopefully it finds its footing again before it ends. I'd like to see it end on a positive note at some point, but if it doesn't, then we'll know what happened. We'll know why. So it'll just be Nickelodeon's decision-making. But anyways, let me know what you think. Do you think old SpongeBob is better than new? Do you think the new is watchable? Do you think it's completely unwatchable? What are your experiences with the show? Do you have kids? Do they like it? What do they prefer? Let me know all of that in the comments below. So thank you very much for watching this Koopa commentary, guys. This has been Super Koopa. Really appreciate you spending the time here, and hope you were entertained. And I will see you guys in the next video. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.